My name is Lee Hutton, and some of you may know me as a senior remote support engineer. But recently, I've transitioned into a role more of a IT security engineer. Every day, all of us in this webinar with me face threats to our business and data that you may not even realise. Whilst the scope of today's session is not to dive into those issues, as I've already covered some of these in some recent live events that Khan and myself completed. In fact, I think you'd all appreciate it. Go and watching them, and I encourage you to do so. You can find them on our website by going to bcs365.co.uk. Once on the website, if you go to the menu and then go down to blog, you'll see the BCS security series that we did there. I really do recommend you watch these. They go deeper dive into some of the threats that we sort of face every day as a business and as end users. Today, I will go over some of the more common threats and some of the things that we can sort of put in place against those, and hopefully spark some thoughts and conversations on what can be better done to protect your environment. I do like to tell people that security is just like an onion, and we should place layers in place to protect us against threats. Just in case one thing fails, hopefully something else should be there to catch it. And as always, nothing is 100% foolproof. Bad actors are constantly changing the way they attack us, and we have to keep evolving with them. And these tips will help sort of place you in a very good standing to deflect these attacks and not be that sort of low-hanging fruit. Please feel free to ask questions throughout. I will try to get to them as I see them, but if not, there'll be some time at the end for some Q&A where I can hopefully sort of answer any questions that you have. Right, let's get straight into it. Right, we're going to start with firewalls today. Firewall is a device that monitors and controls traffic in and out of your network. It's sort of the barrier to your network, almost on the perimeter. Now imagine like your garden gate at your house, sort of on the front garden. It's that flow inside and out of your network, and it's what is there to protect it. Now, I've got the word UTM there. That stands for Unified Threat Management. Sorry. Yes. And what it does is it blocks rules. It blocks rules, and it allows traffic to be blocked. It blocks traffic based on rules. Sorry, I'm going to look at this screen instead. It could do things like block viruses, block file types. You can even get, not necessarily a firewall, but a UTM device. You can get it to block Facebook, for instance, or you can get it to block categories such as gambling and things like that. It does provide better security for your network, and it allows you to securely access your network from outside, for either by port forwarding, which you shouldn't normally do. We'd always recommend a VPN to connect into your network to get access to the tools and data that you have there. Just a simple firewall is just no longer enough. A UTM has so many extra features that are sort of really designed to be an all-in-one tool for your sort of edge device. And how does it work? So packets are monitored. Your internet traffic is measured in packets. For each packet, there's a packet that goes through, and it sends a tiny pieces of information, and you'll have thousands and thousands of them go through a second. So what it does is a firewall sort of grabs a packet, runs it through a list of rules, and then either matches or denies. If it denies, it drops the packet, which is therefore you cannot gain access. And if it allows, then you can go through to your S drive at work or something like that. It prevents unauthorized access to your network, as I just mentioned, by using rules. And there's something called ACLs, which is access control list, which again, these are all there's multiple layers inside a UTM to help protect your network. it prioritizes traffic such as VoIP. The last thing you want is to be on a call and have someone downloading Windows updates and your call sort of starts becoming robotic. You want something called QoS, which is something called quality of service. And what that does is it allows you to prioritize certain types of traffic over others, which is a really powerful feature that we'll go on to a little bit later on. Just an example of something blocking malicious content. I tried to do this. This was a screenshot I took, and as you can see, just you try to access something you shouldn't have done. It's told you no, and this one is those categories I mentioned to you. So this one is criminal activity. So it sort of stops you from going to websites if there's quite a range of there's quite a big list of things you can and can't block, and sort of what you can control, and you can adjust them. Next, let's go on to endpoint protection. So endpoint protection is your machine that you use in its sort of the tools on it that protect it, and you the end user. So we're talking about your antivirus, your patch management, your software blacklisting and whitelisting, service monitoring, it's sort of encryption on your end device, a DNS filter. I mean, I could go on for quite a while talking about things that you could put in place on your machine, multiple things. But why do we need this? Well, we need to protect the end user. The end user, us, we are the first line of defense to data getting in and out of your network. We're the ones that make the decision on what we'd like to do. And it's that decision making that can be flawed sometimes. Endpoint protection is designed to sort of block inappropriate and harmful websites. It provides security for individuals when you're not in your normal work environment. So if you take your laptop home, you've still got, for instance, DNS filtering, which will block bad websites even when you're on your own home network. Encryption. So when you take your laptop away and the device is encrypted, if you lost your laptop and it should be password protected, they can't get in, so they try and take the hard drive out, they plug it into another machine, it's encrypted, it's garbled, they can't read it. Application control. What do you really want people downloading? Sort of using, I use it as an example, the sort of BitTorrent, downloading films at work. You sort of the application that runs sort of, it goes through and it every 15 minutes, I believe, and it sort of says, right, is this installed? No. Okay, great. Is this installed? Yes. Right, get rid of it. And it's a pretty good way of sort of controlling what people can and can't install. Endpoint protection is more of a range, or more of a suite of applications to provide those layers I mentioned to help protect the end users and the data on the network. I'll give an example of web filtering that I mentioned, which is also good for when you're out at home. So I actually tried to go to this website. I know this is a good website, but it's designed to test your tools. And so therefore I tried downloading a zip file, and WebRoot has told me, no, this is a high risk. If you believe this is incorrect, call us or go back to where you were before. And so when you're sort of, another example of DNS filtering is when you're sort of browsing Google, you'll have these sort of green ticks. You've got this orange one down here, which is where I was trying to go. Now, bear in mind that just because it has a green tick doesn't necessarily mean it's not a bad place. It's just that there are bad places do exist, but if they haven't been reported or found yet, then a green tick could indicate that it's got a padlock, it's got a security certificate, all which bad people are now using to sort of gain access and make people trust them, so they can then gain access to your details. Just an example of antivirus blocking. This is a product we use. So on the left here, we've got sort of red bad, green good. It's found a threat we want to see removed, and this one's currently in the process of being removed. And then when things are going great, green is good, on. It's a nice, just quick visual thing that we can see. when we might come onto your machine. Sometimes you might see the screen when we're looking around, especially if you've sort of been compromised. We might run a scan like this. You might see the screen, and no, it's just another example. So excuse me. Another really big example is something called MFA, which stands for multi-factor authentication. And this is factors being something you have, i.e. your phone, something you know, which is a password or a PIN, or something you are, which is your fingerprint or your voice or your iris. And the way MFA works is it sort of, it grants you access after you get 2 factors correct. So once it's presented you with 2 factors, you must pass them, and then it grants authentication and allows access. So you need this because this is probably the most basic protection against credential harvesting. So you say, for instance, you click on a bad link, which I will show you an example shortly. You type something in and you shouldn't have done because you've typed your password in. Well, people will now have your username and password, and they do not hang about when they go to sort of start looking through your mailbox. It's not even humans that do it, to be fair, it's robots. And if you had MFA enabled, they would be asked for your 6-digit PIN, which will only be accessible on your phone. So unless they've got your phone and your username and password, again, it's such a simple and easy way of protecting against some of the most basic attacks out there. I mentioned, you'll hear me talking about the onion a lot, but it is such a huge layer, and it's vital. It's not I'd like it, it's a necessity. It also does remind the end user that's using it of sort of importance of security. If once a day in the morning you've got to pull your phone out and type your code in, or maybe after lunch as well, once you've unlocked your machine or something like that, then it's sort of, why am I doing this? Well, it's for a security measure. So it sort of helps change the culture of why security is important. Some MFA is needed for some regulatory compliance. I think Cyber Essentials, for instance, requires that you have MFA on all your accounts. And regardless of compliance or not, it is a must. It's very easy to set up and very easy to use, which I'll show you in a moment. MFA works. There are free versions and there are paid versions. Free versions are basic. You get what you pay for. We do use a product that sort of ties in with our whole work or domain environment, and that ties into a lot of our tools that we use. So I only have to pull my phone out a couple of times a day, and I've got access to, say, for instance, 10 logons. You can sort of have everything sort of tie in. MFA is actually also useful for verifying that it's actually the user. It's for auditing. So if you log on to the machine and you type in your MFA code and you send an email that you probably shouldn't have done, it's almost, you cannot deny that it was you that did it, because you've already passed certain levels of authentication to get to being able to send that email. So although it's it's useful in protecting against the bad people, it's also sort of a bit of a, come on, it must have been you. You couldn't sort of, no one else could have done it. Which that word is repudiation, which is a word I learned recently. And as I mentioned, it can tie into more than just the email system. It can tie into your whole sort of domain infrastructure. You can also have other accounts on MFA, your PayPal. You probably already use MFA on your bank and things like that. It's just changing that culture to sort of get it into the work environment tends to be a bit difficult sometimes. Let's pop you an example. This is logging into a work machine at work. This is not available on the free version. We use a Duo. And on the left here is the screen that I'm logging onto for the machine. And on the right here is what would come up on my phone. So let me press play. So we type the password in. And as soon as we press enter, as soon as this comes up, our phone is going to get a notification on the phone. Nice big boxes, yes, no. Don't press yes if it's not actually you doing it, because it could be someone sort of outside trying to gain access to your account. And if you do notice that, talk to your IT provider straight away, because that's probably your account's been compromised, or at least your details have somewhere. Once we press yes, we get to the desktop. Literally nice and simple. Here's an example of sort of jumping onto the online portal. So we type in our username and hopefully a password in a second. Has it paused? Oh, sorry, I clicked off the screen. Once we type the password in, we get a slightly different screen. And we can send a push call, so it can call your mobile, or you can enter a passcode from the application itself. So once you press send push, it comes up with the same sort of notification on the phone, which we yes, green, no, red. And please don't just press green every time if you did have this enabled, because that would be bad. And then we're onto our Office account online. Nice and simple, really straightforward. And I think once people realize how simple and easy it is, it's sort of like, why haven't I had it enabled all this time? Yeah, it's really good. So I'm just going to check for some questions at the minute. No, I don't have any yet. Next is compliance. So compliance means slightly different things depending on whether you're looking. Compliance is compliance, sorry, but there's different frameworks. So I'm sure everyone's heard of GDPR. Some of you may have not heard of something called Cyber Essentials or IASME Gold. So GDPR concentrates on the data, sort of around data. Cyber Essentials concentrates around your systems and your security around the systems. And IASME is about your data and the security around your data. These are all fairly baseline frameworks, and they're not simple to get, but they're not difficult. Some of it takes time, some of it's documentation. But yeah, well, we'll go into what we can do to help shortly. But you need compliance because it ensures that policies and practices are in place in your company. Don't rely on common sense for simple things, or any common sense actually, because can someone really get in trouble for doing something if they've never been told officially that they can't do it? I know that's a bit of a controversial statement, but say for instance, someone gets an email saying my bank account details changed because of COVID, and we can't, the lady's on maternity, we need to go to this one so that the director can go to the bank for us while the lady's on maternity. What should that person do? You would think that they should go and check with someone, but I've seen it all too many times in the past where people have just gone, okay, and sent the money to them. Turns out it was a bad actor, and they've now just had someone's money. So we like to sort of put frameworks in place that says, if this, then do this. And I'll show you some examples in a moment. And but it achieves that standard baseline, which I mentioned. And the more people that sort of come up into the same level, sort of makes life a bit more simple because everyone's in the same sort of boat. It does guard against common cyber threats, because if you're Cyber Essentials compliant, for instance, you will have things in place that are security based and focused. So therefore, it does guard. You don't want to be that low hanging fruit I mentioned. It does show other businesses that you are serious and secure, and at least walking in the right direction to being more compliant and secure, and you do take it seriously. And in fact, some contracts require that, working for the government or with the government, for instance, that you do need to be Cyber Essentials. And insurance companies now are also jumping on the bandwagon, said, show me your Cyber Essentials before I'll insure you, or I won't pay you because you weren't this. It's getting more and more complicated, and compliance is necessity going forward, and it won't just be working for government, it will be for insurance and things like that going forward. It's not here yet, but it will come. Everyone's needs are different. Please do call us to sort of go through what your needs are, what you'd like to do, and how we can help. And just some examples of some SOPs and processes. I could talk about this for a long time, but everyone's heard of the acceptable use policy. There's even an antivirus and malware policy. Why would you need those? Well, if someone asks you what's your antivirus policy, you want to be able to show them this document saying, right, we scan every day at 10 o'clock. We all files are scanned on opening, and we do this. If we get compromised, we are supposed to do this, as in, and it's sort of it's just a small instruction document or just a notice of what you're supposed to do. Asset management. Do you know what assets you have? Do you know where they are? Do you know what they're called? There's lots. One I'm working on at the moment is the risk assessment, information risk assessment. There it is. So what's the risk to your data, and how can it be manipulated, broken, stolen, lost, and what can you do to put in place? Now that document is actually quite lengthy, and you can sort of assign risk to it, and then assign controls or implement procedures or practices in place to sort of mitigate that. Again, this all needs to be documented, which you will need to do to become compliant. It's just, like I said, it does things that if you say you should do something and staff are on board and they sign it and they've read it and they don't do it, it's a lot easier. I am an advocate of education over punishment, but there are sort of certain lines that probably can't be crossed, that can't come back from, but that's on a case-by-case basis. Emails and threat awareness, a big topic. Emails are the highest sort of cause for compromised accounts, the highest targeting of phishing campaigns. We need sort of end users to be able to identify malicious emails and links. And this is end user specific because we're the ones that open the emails and sort of manipulate them or go to where it'd like us to go to. I go into a lot more much more detail on one of my earlier webinars, which I mentioned at the beginning. You can get from our website by going to our blogs and looking up these security series. I go into a lot of detail about email, and a lot of statistics. Is actually quite scary. It's the most common threat email is, and we need users to be aware of email threats, is because users are the front line, as I mentioned. We're able to make decisions, whereas robots, yes or no, there is no grey area. Whereas humans, they sort of make decisions. We've got emotions, and I tend to find people in a better mood make better decisions, and people in worse moods make worse decisions. That's just fact. And when emails are the highest threat to a company, is something that we need to educate people on. So we can identify emails. I'm just going to jump straight into an example. And you might sort of look at this as a whole and go, that's not too bad. But there are sort of certain things that we could look at and go, hang on a minute, just sort of send the hairs on the back of your neck up a little bit. So we've got a fake email address. Although that might not look fake, Microsoft generally don't tend to dress up their email addresses like this. Your Office 365 account wouldn't be deleted, even if an invoice wasn't paid. There's certain rules on how long they have to hold data for and things like that. Again, this is sort of designed to get your attention, scare you. Invoice.pdf is quite generic, although on its own might not look bad, but they do contain viruses. PDFs are bad because it will just have something you open up and it'll be a link inside to go somewhere else. Dear customer, do you really think Microsoft would sort of say, hi customer? You know, it's just too generic. No sort of salutation at all. Oh, come back. Sorry. We've got invoices due now, although not a sense of urgency. Now we're sort of starting to go through. We're now seeing that actually it might not be from Microsoft. Bad grammar. That's a very notorious sign. Is bad grammar. And the biggest and most important thing is to check where the hyperlinks go. So you can mouse over any hyperlink in Outlook or Outlook Online, and it will tell you where you're going to go. In the online version, there'll be a small bar at the bottom of your web browser with where it is. and not secure. Not that secure means it's a good or bad place. It's just not secure, so it's not encrypted. It's an IP address. Doesn't say Microsoft /invoice. That already makes red flags go up. And I'll go on to an example of one of these. What happens if you click on one of these? Now, ignore this top bar. What's bad about this page? I'll give it a hint. Nothing. Nothing in this page tells me this is a bad environment. It looks identical to what you would see in a Microsoft environment. The forget my password, that goes back to Microsoft. I know because I did this myself. But if you look up here, it doesn't say Microsoft. Don't go to this place, by the way, please. It's got Google in it for the first start, but doesn't say Microsoft.com or Office.com or Live.com. It doesn't say any of the Microsoft branding or products that you sort of get to know as you sort of use Microsoft products. And you'll type your password in here, and it will just go to a blank page, and that's when people go, oh, because it didn't do what they thought it was going to do. And that means a compromised account. Your details are now in a system that is now being logged into, and they are putting rules in place to read your emails. They are making mailboxes to hide them from you, and they are forwarding them on, which unfortunately is a GDPR breach and should be reported to the ICO straight away, unfortunately. Breached accounts are sort on lightly, as long as we sort of put things in place. They like to know what's happened, how it cannot happen again, and things like that. And everyone in the UK should be a member of the ICO by law. So that was sort of an example of what you could see if you clicked on a bad link. Still nothing suspicious, and definitely please be aware of links in general. So following on from sort of email awareness, you can actually get a product called ATP, which is called stands for Advanced Threat Protection. It sort of does all the hard work for you, takes that decision making away from you, majority of the decision making away from you. It notifies you of any malware or targeted attacks against you, sort of does reports, I guess, across your company. It does content analysis. It actually reads your links and attachment, opens them up, see what they do. It does that all in a sandbox environment on the email servers. I mentioned sandbox. It's like a secure bubble. So if you was to run something, it can't. If it was bad, it couldn't do anything to anyone. And but Advanced Threat Protection also checks your links, and it also adjusts your links to sort of show you it's been checked. And ATP reduces the chance of malware attacks quite drastically. Again, it's another big layer on top of MFA. Sorry, 1 second. How does it work? So it looks up the DNS name of what's trying to target you. So your domain name, example.com, has a reputation based on age and email reputation, what it does. And it sort of looks that up. If a domain was registered within 24 hours and it already looks like spam to you, then it probably is. New domains are being created all the time for bad actors where they're getting caught out and they're having to sort of keep jumping. A lot of it's automatic, unfortunately. It's not humans doing it. But it is a fast-paced moving environment, and we have to sort of keep on top of it. A DNS lookup is a really good sort of tool to, well, the domain was only created 24 hours ago, it's probably bad. It's got an antivirus built in, and also it does content analysis through machine learning and just volume and rules. So when you actually click on junk email in Microsoft, it actually does something. It goes to the machine, and then if sort of you click it, and then all of a sudden, if 50 people click it, then 100 people say it's bad, then 1,000 people, it must be, it's sort of, it learns with our help. Just a couple of examples of some emails you may get. We use Barracuda, and on the left here, you'll get an email. You can set this up to whenever it blocks it, or once a day if you didn't want to have lots of them, because we've used it for a long time now and it's pretty good. That was pretty good. It's very good actually. It sort of does block some of the, do you want to buy this, even though you might have signed up for it. It's technically classed as, it's not spam, it's bulk, and that's considered spam as well nowadays. So you've still got a choice of delivering or whitelisting here. But if you press deliver, you would get the email. Now the link you would be able to click the link, but it would come up saying, are you sure? Are you really sure you want to go to this place? Like in this example here, Facebook's got 2 Ks instead of 1, and it sort of picks up on that, and it's a really good example of phishing attempts and people just trying to steal your username and passwords. This is an personal example I created. So I got a ticket from a company and it had a download link. What actually appeared to me once the email came through was the actual link was adjusted to be safe to open and get. So these were the same. This was an email before it came through the scanner, and this was an email after it came through the scanner. So it's done the check of the link, it's opened it up online, realized it wasn't malicious, and allowed it through and said, okay, yep, that's fine. So that's just a really good example. A bit more of an advanced topic, but it is worth mentioning, and I do tend to find it slightly difficult to explain because it's a really big topic. So excuse me. And we're going to talk about segregated networks and something called POLP, which a lot of people sort of aren't aware of. So with your better firewall, you can segregate your network. You can sort of make a guest network. You can make a corporate network. You can make an Internet of Things devices network. Do you really need the Nest thermostat in the office to be on the same same network as your corporate data? No is the answer to that. All it needs is an internet connection. Doesn't need anything else. Another one that people overlook is a CCTV network. CCTV is evidence, and you should probably control who has access to that. And last thing you want to do is rely on the CCTV and someone's got there first and deleted it. So you can separate that network and only have certain computers that can access it, or certain people, which is those access controls I was talking about. We really start sort of getting technical and quite advanced here. And you need this to control communication and access between the networks that you set up. You need a firewall and switches that are appropriate for that. And it's an extra few layers of security. If someone was to gain access to your network and the finance data and department machines were on a different network, it's just another layer that someone has to get through to get to that. And it's, again, everything's about layering and sort of putting barriers up. You can't stop everything all the time. You can fight it a lot of the time. And if you make it sort of difficult for the person trying to gain access to your network, they often give up because it's not worth the time to spend a year trying to get into the network, for instance. It's a lot easier to send out phishing attacks and get people to trick them into sending their username and passwords to places, because without scaring you too much, if I had your username and password for your email address, I would have access to your OneDrive, I would have access to your inbox, I would have access to your SharePoint. I could potentially log onto your VPN at work, start going through your data at work. This honestly is quite serious, and the consequences are severe. That's why we jump on compromised account tickets straight away, no messing about. The easiest way to do that, if you think you've done it, is change your password, by the way, but I go into that a lot more detail in previous episodes. And sort of POLP is something that is very often overlooked, and that is something called principle of least privilege, and that is only allowing enough access for a user or program for it to do its job. So following on from network segregation, you want to have proper permissions in place and a proper data structure in place for your data. So does the new employee, well, does anyone need to know the financial data? So one thing I've learned recently is, not really recently, but it's sort of become more apparent, is not one single person should have access to everything in the network. That's bad. And you need to segregate it out, including permissions, and that can be done on SharePoint and on a local domain environment. So you sort of both users are covered, and it's something that really doesn't get looked at enough, and should be. And this is a sort of diagram of those sort of network segregations, which are sort of based off of VLANs, which is virtual local area networks. Now, what this is showing is your firewall, then a switch. We're still using one cable, so this one cable can carry down as many networks as we want it to. Bandwidth is still a limitation, but not the amount of networks. So for instance, this one cable goes to your wireless, which has two networks on it, your guest network and your internal network. Your file servers and your web servers are on a different network completely. And what they'll be is on the firewall, there'll be a rule that says this person down here, they can access this, because they'll go up there and go, am I allowed to access that virtual network? It will say yes, only on this port, and it will allow traffic down. So it's really simple, sort of from a top level down point of view. One cable, multiple networks. I think it's the easiest way of sort of explaining it. And they are technically, it's virtual networks, and people should utilize them a lot more. Another big thing is password hygiene. I like to recommend people use a password manager. Password manager store and manage your credentials, quite obviously. It's also a password generator. So if that, or should I just add a 1 on the end? The answer is no, don't do that. Use a password generator. A password manager allows you for sort of much stronger passwords and unique passwords. All you need to do is remember that one master password, and then you're into your sort of vault. Now, don't lose that master password, because it's quite difficult to get back. And it's also quite, well, impossible for the people that host the sort of vaults to get into your data, because the way they're encrypted, it's got like 3 layers of encryption to be stored on their servers. So even if sort of the CEO had a proverbial gun to his head, he wouldn't be able to give them your passwords. Your master password is used to decrypt your vault, and that's why it's so important to keep that safe. It's an additional measure if you're hacked. So say if someone accesses your account and logs onto your computer, they can't sort of just start looking through your passwords. Whereas if you used a password on the browser, Chrome, Firefox, if I was to jump on any of your machines now and you used the password feature in Chrome or Firefox, I could just view your passwords. They're not secure, they're just stored literally in plain text. And the security is that your machine is locked when you're away from it. But not everyone does that, and I could just start looking at your passwords. You should never write your passwords down. I see it all too often. You shouldn't really share passwords. Now, I know in a business sort of scenario that's not always possible. Amazon, for example, you may have 3 people that purchase off Amazon. Well, what a password manager allows you to do is it allows you to sort of place a password in the password manager, and it allows you to share it with the other people who are also sort of tied to your password manager. So you could share it with 3 people, and although it's the same password, it's not written down on the screen. Oh, here's the Amazon password. It's not in the Google Chrome browser, so that you can just go on to Amazon and you're already pre-logged in. Oh, my guess is your credit card details are probably already on there as well. So I could just start buying stuff, and it's really easy to change your address when you're at Amazon. I'll just deliver it to my house, and then I'll go in and hide it afterwards, so you can't actually see it when you go to your previous orders. Again, pretty bad example, but it happens. Your password should never be relatable to you. It should be a phrase or multiple phrases put together. In this example, orange bike with orange bike with wings, with a sort of bit of punctuation and numbers in there, and not just password 1, 2, 3. Oh, I stick an exclamation mark on the end of it. And these aren't people trying to guess your passwords. These are robots that are doing it, and they will try password 1, 2, 3 exclamation mark, and so on and so on. Here's a password manager that I will use at BCS. Yeah, it's got the BCS logo. Here's a password generator, so we can have it set to, some websites still don't like super special characters, but we can sort of have, well, there's almost no limit to the amount of characters you could have, and you can sort of, these are the characters I want to include. You press generate, you copy, you make the password, then you add the password to this once complete with the username, and therefore it's now stored in your vault. This is two separate screenshots here. This top one is sort of, we can search. You can imagine BCS, we have a lot of username passwords we manage for people, and we can search for them quite easily. Just normally a company name, for instance, in there will normally bring up all sort of list of all your passwords for your company. And we've also got a company vault. That was that sharing I mentioned, where the Amazon password would be in the company vault, and only people that have been allowed access to it will have access to it. So really key, don't rely on Chrome and Firefox, and get a proper password manager. There's plenty of free ones out there, but there's ones like this. This for instance is centrally audited. So again, it's that auditability, accountability, making sure that people are doing the right thing. Patching is another sort of big step. Patching is the process of sort of updating, fixing, or improving the software. Every single program has bugs in it. They just haven't been discovered yet. You'll often maybe hear, you may have heard the word of bounty programs. This is sort of companies that say, please try and compromise our software and we'll pay you for it. It's just sort of an incentive for people to sort of poke holes and see what they can do. People often, I see too many people not patching from Windows 7 to Windows 10. And I'll give you an example. When Windows XP went out of sort of non-support, end of life, sorry, was the word I was looking for, people didn't want to go to Windows 7. Well, the NHS, for instance, didn't go to Windows 7. And I don't know if you've heard of the virus called WannaCry. That was basically a known exploit that the CIA used for years. It got leaked, then it got weaponized. And what it did was it allowed, the WannaCry was a worm. It doesn't need any user interaction. It just goes. A worm finds its way. And it used port 445, which is your Windows sharing. So when you have shared folders, and it was encrypting your data, and it ran through the NHS and literally took down all their systems at once. And there's pictures online of sort of people, you can sort of look down the room and all of a sudden you see the black screen where the ransomware's hit theirs, and then the next one. And it's only a matter of time before that happens with Windows 7. And I do urge people to move up to Windows 10. Even hardware has bugs in it. Intel and AMD, the processors that run our systems, and unfortunately they're hardware, so they're a bit harder to sort of mitigate those. And you'll often have security patches to sort of patch those, which can often have sort of performance negativity against the machines. Not always, but it can happen. But as I say, it's not just software, even hardware can have bugs. Patches generally tend to improve your system, improve performance. They'll often have security fixes, bug fixes. Sometimes they come with new features. You probably all had the Windows 10. Every 6 months you'll have one of those features that changes the way your desktop looks or adds something new, and it's effectively a new version of Windows 10, and it's a big feature. They're really hard to control, and it's when you do find a way of controlling it, Microsoft fix it and find a different way to deploy it. And so we actually proactively patch. Someone in the office looks at the patches, searches on them line, see if there's been any negative effects, then approves the patches, and then over the next sort of few days they get filtered to the machines, updated, rebooted, sorry. On servers, they get rebooted Sunday night after the patches have been installed and implemented. And yeah, I've got some examples on the next page of just some very basic sort of patching. And I'd like to talk about notifications. So Windows updates are found here. press the you can either press the Windows key or the search button down here, Windows Updates. You set that up there, you'll get to the Windows Update section. Another big product people use is Office. It generally does tend to do a good job of updating itself, but you can also go to, you know, sort of inside Word, go to the menu, go down to Accounts, and you can see Office updates here. Adobe Reader is another big one. It's also very good at updating itself, but if not, go to Help, check for updates, and you'll see updates. Now, what I'd like to sort of show people is this notification bar. It's actually got a wealth of information that is often overlooked regularly, more because it's under the black arrow pointing up. And sort of this is actually my bar. So my OneDrive syncing, I'm connected to my VPN, green is good. I got, you know, my team says I'm available. Again, my Windows Defender says everything's good. If we look to the left, I can see Windows Update's got an issue. It wants my attention. OneDrive has an issue. It wants my attention. And this could be as simple as you're not signed in, or your password's changed recently and you haven't signed back into OneDrive yet. Or it could be I can't sync any files, so you need to fix it. And people sort of use OneDrive to back up their desktop documents and images. And if you see a red X there, or in fact any of these have a red X, you know, if the Windows Defender has a red X or a yellow warning, again, yellow is warning. You probably should be paying attention to that. Yeah, so just every now and again, have a look in the arrow pointing up, see what you've got in there. You know, Outlook sometimes has the yellow triangle, or it has a key password there. It probably means your emails aren't working properly, so you probably already know that before you get to look in the taskbar. But you can actually drag these down and actually make your task. It does clutter it a bit, but I tend to find that I look in there regularly anyway. So, and the last sort of tip is the biggest and the most sort of more is required is training. We mentioned it a couple of times earlier about decision making, you know, common sense and things like that. So cyber training is actually available. We offer it available free to our customers, and it's sort of what is cybersecurity, types of cybercrime, identity theft, types of attacks. What can you do as an end user? The answer to that is, if you think you've done something wrong, tell someone and just be honest. That's all I can ask, is for honesty. Helps me do my job quicker, and it helps to get the problem fixed quicker. Why do you need to train? So security has got a stigma around it, and I am not sure where that came from. Now, security and convenience don't really go together, but sort of you have to make a balance and put sort of practices or layers in place to make it not convenient, but make it manageable, but also being secure at the same time. And we really need to try and change the culture and the mindset around security. And a lot of that is training. We'll get people to talk about it in the office, you know, and we're here to help. We're here to answer questions. You know, you can always drop me an email. We drop us an email to education@bcs365.co.uk. We're always here to answer questions. And you really want to have the more sort of accounts is often targeted, because financial data, if the data is important to you, why is it not important to other people? It can be used to blackmail you. Ransomware, there's a new style of ransomware going around that not only it used to just encrypt your data and just leave it there. Well, now they're encrypting your data and taking it. They're actually then using it to further blackmail you. So whether they've actually got access to the data or not, I'm not sure. This is fairly new and sort of still unfolding, so to speak. And we really need training. It should be high priority. So out of the things I've said today, MFA, advanced threat protection, and training of your staff is a necessity, not a want. It is a necessity. And the reason we train and reason we do this, and the reason I talk to sort of people, is to the last 3 bullet points there is to protect your staff, protect your business, and protect your data. Data is valuable. Your business couldn't survive without your data, and your staff, your business won't survive without your staff. You need to protect all 3, and you should have a sort of much happier network. Yeah, this is the final session for this one. I'm sure I'll be around again soon. Thank you all for joining me today, and I will speak to you later. Thank you, mate.